afternoon everybody. Today we've got something that's, well, very clustered, isn't it? An array of models, all simple ones, and the clue's in the title, Easy Model Builds. I pinched this from the Meccano magazine that used to have a section for simple builds, but not all of them, but many of them actually did something. Now, not all these are from the Meccano magazine. Some of them are from early, very early in the case of the motor tractor there, sort of 1920s, very small sets, probably a 0 set then. And they range up to something a little bit more complicated, but not very much so. Fiddly maybe. Now the idea of these easy model builds, which has been on the Meccano's own Facebook page for probably 3 or 4 years, is to get a quick return on your model build and a model that does something. That's the way I look at it, because if the model does something it's more interesting and hopefully that builder will stick with the hobby. And it's a very difficult thing to do now because there's so many different hobbies and sports that people do. Now the youngster today likes a quick return, a quick satisfaction out of whatever they're doing in the hobby. So all these models are built on this simple ethos. The model has to do something. It has to be a quick build, and by that I mean that somebody with some experience of Meccano building can build these in under 30 minutes. That should mean that somebody with little or no experience should be able to do them within about an hour. One idea I've used with these models, or many of them, is to use more modern parts than some of the older models use. They're similar parts though, they're modern replacements if you like, a plastic pulley instead of a brass pulley and that sort of thing. The idea being that there's more chance of somebody having a plastic pulley. The big change, I suppose, well not big, but a common change, is I've used rubber grommets instead of spring clips, but we'll show you that sort of thing as we get on. Now I can't remember all of these models from where they all come from because it's been so long. Some of them I do know and some of them I don't. One in particular I've added to, and at the end result is it works a lot better than the original. But let's have a look at the simple models. This is a rather useful gantry crane, useful for the moment because it's holding me cloth in place here with the weight of it. But it's a bit more involved than your normal models from this sort of venture, shall we say. It's a Meccano magazine model. It utilises some modern equivalent parts. I'll show you them in close-up in a bit. Done a couple of things slightly differently. The worst thing about the model, probably the 1-bolt fixings here and here. They tend to come loose on the other side. Depends how much it gets moved around, and this has been moved around quite a bit. And it's been messed around and played with for quite a bit as well. I should have put a longer cord on there for the hook, which I didn't. You can move these, although it tends to come loose. A good addition would be a nylock nut on that there, but done so it's quite stiff to move, so that would mean your lufting of the crane could work quite well as well. We've got the crank this side, very simple, using pulleys to stop the crank moving on its pivot. Round here the design called for some strips, or a strip to be bent. Didn't need to do that, I've just made it up out of angled parts, which are 1 inch by 1/2 inch obtuse angle brackets. As you can see there's a plastic pulley there, plastic pulleys here, which to be honest worked better because the original pulleys sit a little bit wide, because you'd have to turn the pulleys round so the boss is on the outside, and with these axles there ain't much room for error. So I'll just show the operation of the crane. It does rotate 360 degrees, look at that, nicely. We have got the crank handle here for the hook, as I say I've put it on far too short, and we have got, as you can see, traversing as well. It's quite smooth. Basically we've got a continuous length of cord in a fashion. We've got the cord and it's tied to one end of the flange plate here and the other end this end, thus making a complete continuous cord. And as you rotate the crank handle, as you've seen, it moves it along left and right. Now the original design did not have any form of pulley on the crank at this end or the pivot at this end on the axle there. This generally I've found provides no grip whatsoever. What I've done, I've used the rubber grommets that also act as a little pulley as well. You can see here 2 places where I've used grommets instead of spring clips. Again, there's more chance you're having these grommets if you're buying more modern sets. Spring clips haven't been around in metal form, blimey, since, I don't know, late 70s, maybe early 80s, then they went plastic. But anyway, we've got these grommets. They do the same sort of job though, quite easy to put on. They do get a bit hard sometimes, and once they get hard you might as well throw them away, but we've got them on the ends here to act in the same role as the spring clips to stop the crank moving around. And here in the same vein, to hold these pulleys on, we've got the smaller grommets. A very simple wheelbarrow now. I have used spring clips on this model. Very simple, very sturdy though, nice structure, and the colours, like all the models, I've tended to please myself what colours, make them bright. But there you go, a simple wheelbarrow. This is a simple lathe, and it does work in part. It doesn't cut anything or machine anything. We do have rubber grommets again instead of spring clips. I've used cord for the drive instead of an elastic band or a drive band, and it's quite a simple turn of the crank handle, and it turns the chuck of the lathe. This represents the tool holder. Here we have a level crossing gate, a very simple one, but I've embellished it somewhat and made it work quite well, dare I say it myself, before we've operated it on camera. The embellishments really, the red strips for the warning to the road users, the droppers pivot, so to do that we've used nylock nuts instead of lock nuts, and the cord here secured by tying it to the bolt there, which fixes the pulley to the crank handle, although we don't really use the pulley itself, we're just using it as a bit of a securing point for the cord. It runs underneath the flange plate through a hole to this end, which allows it to move up and down correctly. Here we have a simple but perhaps fiddly fairground ride, sort of flying jets, airplane fairground ride. The fiddly bit comes in the stringing round the top to form the supports for the 4 strips. There are only 1 bolt fixings down the bottom, but it does work quite nicely. And again, you could motorise this quite easily. This one is a puzzle from the Meccano magazine. Now, if I remember right, you're supposed to move these one at a time, one position at a time, to get these at this end in the same orientation as these are now, large to small. I've never done it, not in the prescribed amount of time you're supposed to do it in. This is a nice little excavator, and as well as rotating all the way around, although it will catch at this end on the pulleys, but you can just about get by. You can operate the bucket there. And again, we've used rubber grommets instead of spring clips, but the rubber grommet helps rather nice on the cord where it secures to this axle, which this should be a crank, but I've made it up myself because I hadn't got any crank handles at the time, and it works quite nicely. Another rather good one, a blacksmith. Again, I've used more modern parts in places, and the main reason again is because I hadn't got any cranks left, so I made my own for that crank handle. It's a bit awkward to show you holding it at this end, but it does work very nicely, as you can see. Another built-up crank handle is on this mechanical saw, and this works really nicely, as you can see. No problems at all there. There is a downside to the model though. Works both ways, no problem at all. These fixing points here for the legs, they're only 1 bolt fixings and they do come loose. This is a simple pecking bird that works very well indeed. Over the years though, the design changed at times with a different animal doing the same sort of movement. I think there's even one where there's a man kicking, but anyway, it's the same sort of thing. You basically grab it and push and pull, and it actually works quite well really. Basic lever principles really, but it's quite good. Bit silly but fun. A simple tower crane from the Meccano magazine, but a model that had an awful image to look at to build the model, so much so I missed the fact that there was extra strips in the boom across here, which made it come out a bit further, but also less of a curve to these strips here. The plus side is this design without those strips means obviously you need less parts. The only real downside to this model is the lack of weight in the hook here. Made out of an angle bracket and a 3/8 inch 9.5mm bolt. It's a bit too light, but as you can see it struggles to drop because there's no weight in the hook. But it can work, but not too bad. But if you've got a proper hook, use one of those. And lastly, for this batch, is this motor tractor from, I think it was a 0 or a 1 set from the 1920s, early 1920s. And it has steering in a fashion, as you can see there. Not proper steering, but it has got some steering. Not too bad. A little bit fiddly to put together at the front with this sort of radiator effect there gearing inside, but not too bad. Makes good use of the sector plates, which is always a pain really, because they were included in lots of sets right up to the, well, 1976. They always had 2 in each set, and it's quite hard to find what to do with a lot of those, so you tend to have a load left. Underneath we've got very simple steering, using the cord to turn the steering at the front. Connect it to this bush wheel, which in turn connects to this bush wheel up here via an axle to form a steering wheel. I like the seat, it's quite nice, little tractor seat there. And again, on this model I've used grommets instead of spring clips. Well, I hope you enjoyed that, folks. These are quite simple models, but they all do something, some more than others. Some perhaps are a little bit dull and others a little bit more interesting for the basic models that they are. Now I'm going to continue this, and hopefully the other members will add to the album on the meccanozone.com Facebook page as well. But I've been doing, well, I've not been doing it very logically really, because I've had a very similar project ongoing about the same time, and that is to build all the models in a 1954 Zero set. The main part of many Meccano sets from fairly early on up until the late 70s. The main structure for the models in the sets, or most of the models, are these flange plates, and it's a brilliant idea. You get a basic chassis for a car just like that. But because I've been doing this and the O set project, I've used a lot of these and I'm running out. So I dare say some of these will have to be taken apart to provide more progress on the project, which would be a shame really, because it'd be nice to see them all lined up and played with at a show maybe one day. But there you go. I hope you enjoyed that, folks. Bye for now.